Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Captain America, the First Avenger, starring Chris Evans, Haley Atwell, Hugo Weaving, Stanley Tucci, Dominic Cooper, Sebastian Stan, and Tommy Lee Jones, and directed by Joe Johnston. Now, before I get into this movie, I just have to say this right now. I know this director from plenty of cheap movies like Jurassic Park 3, which I'll get to this summer, The Wolfman, and other things that look kind of cheap. And this isn't one of them. This is probably the most expensive movie he's ever done, in my opinion. So, let's get into it, because this is the prologue of The Avengers next week. We open the movie off onto the snow where Captain America was buried in the ice at the end of the movie. But I'll talk about that later. But we do move back to Norway in 1942, when we first meet Johann Schmidt, played by Hugo Weaving, who I'm the biggest fan of for his physical acting, and I honestly love his car. And we also get introduced to the Tesseract, which is a blue cube with opera noise of men sounding kind of music. Was an awesome way to get introduced to our villain of the movie. We see a skinny version of Steve Rogers, played by Chris Evans in a CGI thing, thanks to Benjamin Button, who I reviewed in those two Fantastic Four movies, and I really enjoyed the character and his lines, deliveries, and if any actor said those lines, like, for example, "Is this a test?" or "I don't like bullies," it would have been a terrible movie like the other two movies from Salinger, and one from the 90s, and the Salinger one from the 1970s. But here, he plays it very well. Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes. Now, I like this character as we see him in the future movies, and as well in here, as well as they go to Stark Expo, with a couple of girls he takes with Steve. And I like this actor, even though he plays nasty people, like in I, Tonya, for example. But the man plays both good and evil as well, and very well, and as well as we will see in the future movies. While at the Stark Expo, we get introduced to Howard Stark, played by Dominic Cooper, who I've seen in other movies, for example, My Week with Marilyn Monroe. But this guy is, I'm afraid, miscasting for reasons I can't explain because they'll sound a bit harsh. But he made no impression on me, but I'll let it slide because Marvel can do good things for their movies, in my opinion. In the same scene that we're at the Stark Expo, we get introduced to Dr. Abraham Erskine, played by Stanley Tucci, who I enjoy in movies like the Hunger Games franchise and The Devil Wears Prada, and I enjoy him in this. And I don't find the story about Schmidt believable, unfortunately, because of his acting. But I do like this character, though. Don't get me wrong, for what little he does. He does a good job of playing German. Haley Atwell as Agent Peggy Carter. I will be watching that TV show the character has when it's appropriate. But here, she doesn't do much of the badass stuff, except for a couple of things. Like when we're introduced to her, she punches a guy in the face who was trying to flirt with her. And at the end, she shoots a Hydra guard, which I'll get to later. But that was a little unrealistic, in my opinion. But I like Agent Carter here for what good the actress brings to screen. Colonel Chester Phillips, who's played by, I'll get to this in a sec, was played by Tommy Lee Jones. And the reason I said that was because he always played the same guy, whether it's The Fugitive, Batman Forever, Men in Black, and No Country for Old Men. I don't mind the actor, but my problem is he always plays the same guy in every movie I've seen him in. It's annoying. Dr. Arnim Zola, played by Toby Jones, who I've seen in movies as well, is a good villain for Captain America, especially when we get into one of the Captain America sequels. But here, he's fine, but does play a good villain here. Skinny Steve is being transformed into buff Captain America Steve, was a good version of skinny CGI Chris Evans to how he looks today. I also really like the chase sequence between Steve and a Hydra agent called Heinz Kruger, but when he says "Hail Hydra," that's going to be used again and again in not only this movie but the Captain America sequels. And they'll begin to be a bigger threat later on, but "Hail Hydra" is a funny salute in an odd way. Steve becomes the chorus girl, dresses up like in a costume, and appears in the movies. And he has shows all around the country, including going to Germany or Norway, wherever this is, and has appeared in the comic books. And after that incident with Dr. Erskine, which, when he gets shot, which was a sad moment of the film, but I like that Captain America that inspired everyone in the world. Steve finds out the group of his friend Bucky is on behind enemy lines, and he gets into action as Captain America. Was inspiring, sure. It's also dangerous, but does save all the men, plus Bucky being introduced. Dum Dum Dugan's life, played by Neil McDonough, who is a character actor I don't necessarily like. There's something about his face I just do not trust. No offense to Mr. McDonough. But I like him here more than in any other movies I've seen him in. But I also like that action sequence too. Schmidt gets punched in the face by Captain America and suddenly damages his mask and takes it off and becomes the Red Skull, who is very menacing, and I like the makeup of the Red Skull. He looks like he really did burn in it. And kudos to the person who did the makeup job on Hugo Weaving. It just looks realistic. We get a Stan Lee cameo at a press conference of Captain America saying to a guy, "I thought he'd be taller," which I thought was very funny. I laughed out loud, but it wasn't as funny as in The Amazing Spider-Man in the library. I love the scene when Agent Carter shoots the shield Steve holds and says, "I think it works." And I also love how he uses his shield, and I really like his uniform. I mean, it really feels like the 1940s in a modern way to tell the story in the 1940s, excuse me. This plot is happening very quickly. It's a zippy 2-hour movie kind of way, and it also feels very Joe Johnston. Like, for example, it just goes like, hurry, 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 that kind of thing. And that's very Johnston-like. When Bucky falls off the Hydra train, I knew it was going to set up a Winter Soldier movie because in the comic books, Bucky becomes the Winter Soldier. And I'll talk more about that in the Captain America 2, but I like that it was a setup for not just the Avengers, but a Winter Soldier movie featuring Captain America. I really like the final fight between Captain America and his team versus the Red Skull and Hydra's team, and Captain America versus the Red Skull. It was a very action-packed and very edge-of-your-seat kind of fight. And can someone remind me when the Red Skull disappears by the Tesseract? What the hell was that? He must have returned at some point in this series. Like, really? It was super confusing to death, and where he was going, it still drives me nuts. Steve goes into the water and sinks himself into the same ship the Red Skull flied in and fought him until he puts him in the Tesseract. The Red Skull, I mean. Why? Because people were going to die because of that damn plane, which makes sense for comic book reasons. And Steve goes to a sleep for 70 years, which is amazing. And all of a sudden, Nick Fury shows up. And we're in today's world now. But for one scene, for Samuel Jackson, it made no impression on me. But after the credits roll, we get a teaser trailer for the Avengers, and that was really awesome. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 7.7 out of 10. This may be the weakest Captain America movie today, but we'll see when we get to the other ones. But it's better than Thor, and I love the look of this movie, and there are some things I'll talk in the other movies, and it was a success to tell Captain America's story after they never succeeded in the 1970s or 1990. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I will be back next week with the Avengers. And before I say goodbye, please, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, watch some more videos, and please leave a positive comment in the bottom. And until next time, Avengers Assemble!